Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday. It is July 6th. It is 2011, and this is Day 9 Daily number 320. Ooh, it's Terran week, and today we're doing Terran versus Terran, but an interesting tale with which to regale you before we begin the daily. So, originally, what I wanted to do was to look at Terran mech, because this is something that's been cropping up quite a bit lately. We saw Gonzi do some wondrous things with his mech play, taking down some tip-top names in TvT, into leagues. However, I was stuck in traffic because I had to drive from San Diego back to Los Angeles, and despite leaving at 3, I got back home at like 6:45. So today, I do have a replay that I've wanted to look at for a while. And for a while, I mean, it was like released like 2 days ago. And we're also going to be doing a fun little experiment today that I've also been wanting to do for a while, which is that we're going to do a ton of question grabbing and audience interaction throughout the entire show. So what I'm going to pose to you right now is that you tell me topics that you would like me to focus on during the analysis of this daily, and I will tell you right now, we're going to be watching Sjow versus Rain, one of the weirder Terran versus Terrans I have ever seen. It actually does not have any sort of marine tank typicality to it. It's just crazy, start to finish. So given that context, feel free to ask questions of what you'd like me to focus on. And avoid questions like, what do you think about marine bunker rushes in this matchup? Or 2 racks openings? Because it's hard to answer that because that doesn't happen in the question. Just general topics that you'd like. And of course, I'd like everyone to go to nasl.tv. Make sure that you get ready to come on out to the North American Star League Finals so that we can go ahead and join us together in casting funnedness. So, just feel free to ask questions. I will see them. I have everything open, and yes, I'm seeing a lot about positioning. Greedy Uhu is talking about tank positioning, which is actually very, very important because there hasn't really been a micro daily. There's been no daily that's been like, no, this is how you control these units in this specific circumstance. That becomes a little hard to sort of do on the fly because if you have a game that's 18 minutes long, there will generally be a 45-second period where micro crops up. But tank positioning is something that can crop up all game long. So that's great. We're going to talk a lot about that. That's great. And N44S is talking about expand timing and how that relates to all this stuff. All right, cool. Expand timing. This is awesome. People are asking about the meaning of life. Won't be talking about that today. Don't know a lot about life. I just know about StarCraft 2. Rules of thumb for saving energy for scans versus muling. Great. This is awesome. And we're going to take, and that was from Pants B. Here's one more thing that we're going to take from MJD24, who says, Dana, what's the best way to siege tank leapfrog into someone who is also having a lot of siege tanks? So that's great. That's a great little specific thing. So we're going to try to focus a lot on the positioning of tanks today because it is a crazy tank-heavy game. We're also going to focus a good bit on things like expand timings because that came up some in the chat, not as much as the tank positioning thing. And also I like that question about scans versus mules at key times in the game. So also what we're going to do is the game is, well, I won't spoil you on the game length, but periodically we're also going to stop. We're going to take questions from the chat that people want to know about the current progress of the game. So let's go ahead and dive right into that. As we go into the map, it's a GSL crevasse. Whoa! It looks like someone was watching this at warp speed. Seems like some jerk tried to blast through preparation for a daily because he was stuck in traffic in San Diego. Ugh! Isn't that yucky? So we see Fnatic Xeris here. This is actually not Xeris. This is Rain. Xeris did not go from being a C+ Protoss in Brood War to organizing the NASL to being a Grandmaster Terran. That is not his career life path. This is just him kindly donating his account to the player on the Fnatic team. And of course, Dignitas's Sjow up in the top right here. Sjow is one of the few Terrans I've seen experiment a lot with the mech styles of play. And mech kind of has a weird functionality to it altogether, just due to the fact that the positioning is... The rules kind of vary a little bit. Like in general, with a lot of marine tank mixes, you're looking to use your tanks as sort of like a center, an anchor for your army, if you will. You sort of move the marine tank army around, and then you dock and anchor with your tanks, and then you can sort of spread around, and then you can sort of gently leapfrog. But a lot of mech play has the Hellions sort of moving around like crazy, with the tanks readjusting themselves based upon the craziness that the Hellions are doing. We're going to look at a little bit of that as we come in, but I just want to note that Sjow, if you are looking for some good references of mech play, go get a lot of Sjow Terran versus Terrans. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to see a lot of cool Terran mech plays from him. Now, Rain is doing something interesting. He's going for a refinery first, and then he's going for a barracks. In this early stage of the game, we're going to be looking a lot at the openings because they do very different openings, and Rain does a very crazy style, to be honest. And we're seeing the very standard fast command center by Sjow. Is he actually even getting a barracks first? Nope, not at all. He will now be building a barracks. On Crevasse, I always talk about this in tournaments, it's a big meta game map because this expansion is so convenient. You'll see a lot of players just say, well, hell, if he's probably going to be early expanding, I'll early expand too. Whereas other people take the route of, well, hell, if you're early expanding, then I'm going to try to do a lot of damage really fast. So as we can see, if you get gas, then barracks, you can get a factory the instant the barracks is finished. You do have to cut the orbital command by a little bit. We see not as many SCVs are going to be popping out for our little green Terran. We can see, oh, there's Sjow pulling ahead. Isn't he precious? Taking his first steps into the lead pool with his SCV count. So let's see some of the nutty transitioning that ends up happening. That's actually, well, let's go ahead and address some of the positioning questions, the tank positioning, because a lot of strategy needs thought in advance. And very often what people will do as the in advance part is they will have their build. They will say, let me get my very fast Banshee and try to kill him as best I can while expanding at this time and building barracks at this time. That's fine. But I think what is often way overlooked is trying to find key points on the map. As many of you know, Terran vs. Terran has oodles to do with tanks and where your tanks are positioned. So let's find some good spots where we want our tanks. So let us journey to the minimap. Bum ba da dum ba da dum. This Xel'Naga watchtower, as it is in between the two bases, seems very, very important. In particular, though, if we look, this is one entrance to our opponent's base. Here is another entrance to our opponent's base. And technically, this is one as well. But I want you to note that if you have tanks positioned here and here, you essentially lock down all the ground movement from your opponent. Likewise, if we are at this entrance, so here's one entrance, and again, if we move over here, there's the other. These are the only two entrances to Sjow's base. So if we can position tanks out here outside of Sjow's base, he is going to be in total lockdown, and we can expand behind. Likewise, for Sjow, the corresponding position on the map for him is actually over here. Very simple, but we've clearly labeled some good places for these tanks. It's on a high ground, there's sort of constriction there. And once we've labeled these, we can easily start to note how we're going to deny expansions if we really want to push into it. Interestingly, for a tanking player, often it's really tough to push up into the main because this is a high ground. It often behooves you to just plant tanks out here and just try to prevent him from taking this base. Just try to prevent him from taking this as his third. Because if we can position tanks here and deny him from taking his third, he's stuck on two bases, and we just go all starvation all the time. So great. Now, I don't care if you're going Marine tank or mech. I don't care if you're rushing. I don't care if you're playing a long-term game where you're going super passive. We have a place where we're trying to get to, which is really key. Many of you who spend your time in between games strategically with build orders are thinking all about how you want your buildings to go down, but when you get those units, you'll just flood on in for the attack. We don't want you to do that. I do not want you to just flood in with your units and go straight for a big attack, because often you can go for a huge attack and then just stop here, and there you go. Boom, you are now suddenly at a gigantic advantage. I want to be trying to push past this little Xel'Naga watchtower, and in particular, I kind of want to be leery of Sjow sneaking out this backside. And likewise, if Sjow is trying to do a containment here, I want to be leery about Rain sneaking out this backside. So Sjow going to be moving on in, and he is going to run into a little bit of a problem. He's getting shot in the face. One of the most difficult problems to deal with in Terran vs. Terran, and if you're trying to deposit a check in South Central Los Angeles. We see that, interestingly, Rain going for a very fast starport, second gas going down. When I was initially watching this game, I was thinking, aha, just a super fast Banshee play. And when I was looking over at Sjow, I was thinking, aha, he was just doing a very standard early expand play. Hell, I get my second expansion, or excuse me, my second base up real fast. Better make some mariners really early on so I can control this space. But I was a little interested to see this refinery go down. And what I'm going to do is when we're going to get to the 6-minute mark, we're at the 5-minute mark right now, we're going to take some more questions about what the opening is. I'm going to go ahead and start the question grabber yet again. Come on, Markio's question grabber. Very good. All right, awesome. So we are now refreshing to get ready for that. But let's bounce back and look at the interesting stuff that's going to happen in the next minute. We see Sjow, who is going for this. And of course, when you ask for the opening question, say that you're asking about Sjow or Rain, so I know who you're referring to. We see the tank going down for Sjow. In my eyes, this looks like a pretty typical play, just getting his factory reasonably fast while stockpiling up on some Marines with one base. I'm seeing Xeris, aka Rain, excuse me, going for a ultra-fast Banshee, and I was a little interested to see this fast second gas and this very fast factory. This to me felt a little bit like an early push play, but then what do I see? A very fast expand from our good friend Rain. So there were some good big questions that I was having, and as we're going to see, what doth come down out of this junk? Nothing quite yet. A Raven pops out. Let's take a look over at Sjow's base, and we see double factory coming down. Double factory. Now, as you're preparing these questions to ask, and as many of them are rolling in, feel free to ask questions like, why the hell would he be going for a 2-factory? Feel free to wonder to yourself right now as you're reading other people's questions in the chat, why would these 2 factories be going down? Why would a Raven be popping out so incredibly quickly for this Terran player Rain? These are reasonable things to ask right at the start. So let's go ahead and take some questions. First question from Neo F Strife says, Dear Day 9, Sjow is going to push Marines to be aggressive a bit. Like why or why would he not do this? So one of the hardest things ever is to have really clever timings based upon what he's doing. There's a lot of clever timings where you can just push with X number of Marines with an opening, and it's just good versus whatever he ends up doing. It's just a reasonably good time to push. And as we can see, we see Sjow stockpiling a good bit of Marines, but an important question to ask for with any early attack that you want to do is, what is your first non-early attack gonna look like? When is your first signs of big aggression gonna pop out in the middle-ish game? So for instance, a very typical time to push out in Terran vs. Terran is when you have 3 to 4 tanks, a bunch of Marines, and some medevacs. You want to do a Marine tank medevac push. Or if you're a Zerg player, typical time that you want to do aggression is with Mutalisks, right? Just doing some harassment with the Mutalisks. So you need to ask yourself, does this Marine push contribute to that at all? You never want to just do a Marine attack because you're thinking, well, I hope I just do damage. It needs to force him to do something. Let's say you're going Marine tank and you've been having a lot of trouble in the mid-game with a guy who takes 3 bases really fast. Let's say this is the problem you've been encountering in the mid-game. A solution you would come up with is, maybe I can do a Marine push early if I think he's doing that 3 command center build, and put pressure and kill him. Or I should just say, prevent him from doing that opening altogether. And if he's not doing that, I don't need to do this attack at all. Notice how a later problem is solved by this earlier aggression. It's a big mistake to think, oh, I could just attack with Marines now and win. Bum, ba-da! Because then what happens if it doesn't go very well? Ugh. Now you're in a horrific spot. And if you didn't know the purpose of it, you don't know if this spot accomplished you anything at all. Let's take one question on the Rain side of things, because that is obviously kind of a nutty build. I'll actually take this question from Rama's DNR because it's so great. It says, Dear Day 9, because Sjow got a later factory, do the numbers matter if Rain gets into proper positioning? Let me read that one more time. For some reason, my brain just fizzed out. Because Sjow got a later factory, do the numbers matter if Rain gets into a proper position? Ah, I see. This is a common issue that comes up in a lot of Terran vs. Terrans, where it kind of feels like it doesn't matter how many Marines I have. He has more tanks, and he has the better position, so I can't break him. What the hell do I do? This is, there's a couple of answers, again, and it kind of depends on how... Actually, it's a really good question. How is the best way to explain that? So anytime you're doing something a little bit later, like for instance, maybe your opponent went for 3 barracks, but then you expanded and then went for 3 barracks, you want to step past when your initial push was going to happen. Let's say he was going for, like in this game, we see 1 factory out for Rain. Let's say Rain was going to try to contain you with 3 tanks, and you were going to try to push out when you had 3 tanks. Because Sjow is getting these 2 factories up, what he wants to do is make an attack later on. Anytime you're feeling a little bit of pressure in the right now, based upon the timing of these builds, such as you scout him and go, oh geez, his factory is earlier right now. You can say, well, that's fine. I'll try to do an even bigger attack later because I have my earlier expansion. In a general sense, whenever you have more bases, you want to try to be doing your damage much, much later than your opponent's trying to do his damage. So, in other words, feel free to just wait a little bit. But also, Sjow can easily do some sidestepping just with dropships and try to peel his positioning away. So let's go ahead and bounce back to the game. Oh, cool. Wow, this question grabbing. Markio's question grabber is so great. Stop, clear, fantastic. Bouncing back to the main game. We see Sjow getting these 2 factories, and we see this Raven popping out from our Terran buddy, Rain. And this is actually an interesting technique that you can do a lot. If you are going for an ultra-fast Banshee, often you can straight up get a Raven, plan on getting a Viking, and skip an engineering bay altogether. With those extra minerals, we get ourselves a fast command center. We're saving minerals on things like turrets because we're going to be going for a Raven and a Viking. We're cutting out Marines. Notice how few Marines we are seeing Rain have. Notice how few Marines we are seeing Rain have. I want to note how this is actually very, very clever in its own right. Basically, what Rain is saying is, I want to go mech. I'll just tell you right now, he goes mech in this game. I want to go mech. What problem arises? I want to note, again, how I'm doing this. What problem arises later? How do I solve this earlier? What problem arises in the later stages? Oh, these Banshees come in and I seem not to have that many Marines. Do I get missile turrets? Well, no. What he's going to do is he's going to say, I'm going to stay low on Marines. I'm not going to just build a whole ton of Marines and then go mech because that's too big of a bump. No reason to go far in this direction so that you can go back in the opposite way. That doesn't make any sense. That's weird. So what he's going to do is he's going to get the Raven, he's going to get the Vikings, saving money on turrets, saving money on building Marines. He can keep focus on his build. So very, very clever. And we're seeing him get these blue flame Hellions. Nifty, nifty, thrifty, difty. So Banshee harass. A huge problem with mech, and actually with most builds, is that you can't really put pressure on your opponent early. So this Banshee going down, I think, is absolutely fine. It generally will force a couple of turrets. And you can justify this in 2 ways. You can have the justification be one of those, again, I had a later problem. My problem later is that I was putting no pressure on them and my pushes were too weak. I will solve that by getting a Banshee. Alternatively, you can just say, I want to open up Banshee because I think it's good. How do I transition from going Banshee into mech? It's that second one that I think is going on here. He likes going Banshee. How does he still go into mech? Well, he's going to get this Raven. He's going to see there's an early expand, and he's going to go, oh my goodness, I actually don't need to go for a bunch of Vikings right off the bat. And as we can see, he's building this factory and doing this funky trading. Sjow, on the other hand, is getting himself Hellions a pair at a time. We see Sjow going for his fast Viking. And I actually dislike Sjow's play a little bit. It might be because I don't quite understand the transitioning that he's necessarily going for. Got him! But we're going to see Sjow go for a big push with Blue Flame Hellions and Marines. And with his Blue Flame Hellions just going every which way because they're dumb. We do see the Blue Flame Hellion done for Rain, who I keep wanting to call Xeris. And this sort of push is, this is a variant on the typical Marine Hellion action we've been seeing a lot of players do. Generally, you see someone do this on an early 1 base by building Marines out of 1 barracks and by getting 1 factory with a reactor on it. Sjow's doing essentially the same thing, just a touch later, just a little bit later. I still don't quite know how I feel about these two barracks, and hopefully I can begin shedding some light on that later on. Sjow is going to do this push. He's doing some poking and prodding with Vikings. I will say, I will even pause to say this, my favorite units in this matchup are Vikings and Hellions, because they force huge amounts of space control into your hands. If you have a lot of Blue Flame Hellions early on, he literally can't really move out and do anything. He needs many expensive units, like tanks, Marauders. Same with Vikings. He can't really move out and do anything with air. And you can fortunately do this little harassment with Vikings. Never ever overlook that. There are actually many openings you can do in this matchup where you open with a lot of Hellions and a lot of Vikings, and that's it. And that transitions surprisingly nicely into many, many, many styles. So just a little bit of pepper that you can add to any of your builds to create a nice, spicy entree of Terran vs. Terran destruction. So we see him repelling that accordingly. But we can see a lot more focus going on in this build order opening by Rain. And I like this a lot. I talked about this quite a bit yesterday, where I said less is more. Notice how all that's really happened from this Terran player is that Rain just got a Banshee, and then went straight into making more factories, straight into getting that set of upgrades that he needs for the Blue Flame Hellions. Also, this is a surprisingly essential component to mech. I'll just say this. Why would Vikings be such an important component to mech? I'll say it. I'm accessing the chat. Want to see what you think about that? Yep, there's some very obvious things. It's the easiest way to control drops. And oh, I love the way people are saying this. Hades Vine, Deraskmissus, whose name I don't know how to say. Vision, the vision advantage, my favorite advantage. If I have more Vikings, my tanks will always have the vision advantage, and therefore my tanks can shoot your tanks unless you waste a scan. Which now brings me to this next little topic. We're going to look at this whole scan timing. At this point in time, one thing that's very nice about Rain's opening is that Rain has the blessing of being able to spend almost everything on mules. Does not have to do any funny monkey business. Youch. With scanning, he can spend plenty and plenty on his mules, and interestingly, because he has these Vikings, he will always be able to do that all game long. And likewise, in Camp Sjow, Sjow is going to have to start saving for scan. We already see a little bit of scan saved up, but especially because he is only just now beginning his Viking production in pairs, we can see that Rain is going to be slightly ahead, and about now is when players will generally begin saving for scans. Around now, around when you begin needing to do these pushes and you're worried about having some sort of Banshee presence in there, and you're starting to see how this lines up with our idea of tank positioning. If we know that this is what we want to go for instance, exactly what Rain is doing right now. If we know that this is what we want to go for, when do we start saving for scan? Right before we're going to do the big attack to go there. Bam! Knowledge gain! Same thing for Sjow, right? When is Sjow starting to save scan? Well, it's not just, I'm nervous. I don't want to have Banshees kill me. It's, oh, look, he's moving out. Sjow's actually going to gear up to try to take himself a faster third base. So he needs this scan all saved up nice and dandy. And as we can see in the income front, we're going to see a little bit more income for our red Terran player because he's just muling his little heart out. Look at that low energy. So we see, again, this Raven is going to be throwing down these auto turrets, and this is a play that never really occurred to me, but this Raven allows mech armies to be aggressive in small numbers. Typically, you need to wait till you have a lot of tanks, and you'll do these sort of middle-ish expos. That's generally when you're going to end up pushing out with mech. But suddenly, oh my gosh, what does he have? He has 2 tanks? How beautiful. He can use these auto turrets, throw them down to secure a good position. Why is this a good position? Because it helps secure this freaking damn ramp. Can I emphasize this position enough on this map? No. I can't emphasize that position enough because it's important to analyze positions with these tanks. So now we're going to end up popping into a lot of cool tank positioning questions. We're going to see Sjow start to mass up tanks, and the last thing you want to be in, the last position you want to be in, is letting your opponent get way better tank positioning. Ordinarily, you would not be able to break in like this. Ordinarily, you would want to stay back this far, but because this timing attack was so nice, Rain can take the opportunity to advance a little bit farther forward and kill oodles and oodles in the process. Now, I want you to note that there's also some disorganization in terms of Sjow's structures. I actually think that Sjow's a brilliant player with these amazingly deliberate unit compositions that can do a lot of wonders. But look at how lean Rain's base is. This is the less is more thing I love talking about. There's one barracks. There's no engineering bays anywhere. There are all structures with add-ons, thanks to this barracks being an add-on producing machine. Wonderful. And then over here, we see extra factories that, I mean, it's not necessarily bad to have these factories without add-ons. It can sometimes be a good way to get a leg up in the later stages, but we see these barracks aren't really getting a chance to do that much. We see this engineering bay that's a little bit perhaps excessive as we've had to build these missile turrets. Starport's in good shape. But just by having a little bit more leanedness, let me actually pop back to this right before the battle began. I want to note how similar these unit mixes were. But we're seeing a lot of Marines in the count for Sjow. Look at how even they are in the food count. And then the Blue Flame Hellions swing in. The auto turrets swing in. The Marines get absolutely obliterated. And look at the food plummet for Sjow. When the units lost tab, he has lost way more money than his opponent. All thanks to that leadedness early on. I wanted to note at the 14-minute mark, we're going to pause, we're going to take some more questions from the chat. So feel free to start stockpiling your questions about why didn't this happen, or should he be doing this, should he not be doing this. So let's talk a little bit about tank positioning right now. These tanks are positioned just barely in range of these unit-producing structures. It is important that these tanks are very far away. You generally always want tanks slightly in range of what you want to be hitting. Ever so slightly in range and no closer. We're seeing very careful positioning by Rain. Absolutely essential. We're going to zoom forward a little bit because there's not that much interesting aspect about tank positioning at this point in time. But I do want to note, I think it's very important that Sjow is making this Viking early. This is a big tool that you need to do whenever you're feeling a little bit behind in these battles. If you can seize air control, that should be one of your first priorities, because now what we're seeing Sjow do is he's going to do a nice little counter push. And if I am Rain in this position, and I've lost the air advantage, there's nothing that wrong with unsieging and pulling back to here. There's nothing really that bad. You've already killed off his expansion. As we can even see, Rain is even gearing up to take himself a third. He has all these production structures in good shape. He doesn't need to kill off these factories. He's at an advantage. The number one rule of the expert player is that you don't need to extend bigger and bigger advantages. You only need to maintain an advantage. Don't go for a very win. You only need to win by the ever so slightest of margins. So this is actually a really big mistake that a lot of people make in tank positioning battles, is that they lose air control or they lose momentum. Let's say the opponent starts getting a good amount of units more, and in a little bit he will gain more. This scan by Rain is a way to check to say, maybe I should really begin pulling back. And again, there's nothing wrong with just going for it. But he sees that his opponent is behind on the tank count. And again, once air control starts to dissipate, we're now seeing Rain spending his scans on there. And one thing I want you to note, let's actually pull back and look at the energy, since that was a question that was asked in here. The energy is actually going to stay pretty damn low. We're going to come back right here to where the Raven was, and we're going to zoom up ahead to around the 13-minute mark. Yep, there's a mule going down, and the orbital command goes up. Notice how nicely these two energies line up. Ooh, that gets me excited. This is when all the fancy swapping was going on with the structures. Great, we see the Ravens out, and hey, we have enough to mule. So now that we don't have Blue Flame Hellions in our mineral field, we're going to mule. Look at the push going on at the front. Look at the push going on at the front. And it looks like he will be saving up those. No, he's going to go for a mule. Why is he going to go for a mule? Because he still has the air advantage. He still has the vision advantage. Starting to realize now that this is very, very, very simple. Like, this is pretty straightforward. He's really not saving scans. He's just muling. And then once his air control goes away, yeah, that's when he starts to save scan. A lot of it comes down to air. For Sjow, the reason he was saving scan early on, again, is it related back a little bit to that detection. So let us advance forward to the 14-minute mark, so that way we can begin taking some questions. And of course, whoopsie daisies, start the question grabber. Yeah, God, I love Marky. That guy is the man. He is the man! And he is a man, no doubt. This is the part where I was just noting, you lost air control. Go ahead and pull back. Paramount to note. Double Viking production. Very good. So we are seeing Sjow barely trying to eke his way forward, but he is just kind of going for a little bit of a bust here. Just kind of all-inning his way forward. Note for the record that even though Sjow did lose a good amount of SCVs, he's not that far behind. And interestingly, Rain was slightly farther ahead in terms of this thing. God, I gotta be better about putting this up early. In terms of, not that. How do you do the army? Yeah, I don't know my hotkeys. Look, in terms of supply, Rain was actually farther ahead earlier on. The one advantage that he gained from this battle was he killed off unit-producing structures, which is no doubt always going to be good. Vikings landing for Sjow. Good stuff. And as we can see, where is Rain rallying? Just to here. He wants to hold this position, and he has absolutely no need to advance forward. I want you to just realize, once again, that this is a very simple plan that Rain is executing on. He's going up to the same spot again, and that's where he's making most of his big plays. That's where the auto turrets went down. Now that the attack went down, that's where he's repositioning all his stuff. Great. So, let's take this question from Stasis TV. Dear Day9, why not be more mobile, Terran, and do more drops and take advantage of the immobility of the siege tanks? With more Viking medevac bio, couldn't you take advantage by air control? This is actually something interesting that has not been explored as much. One of the big strengths of this mech play is that if you have enough Hellions, it kind of smashes Marines. It actually makes Marines feel immobile, in a sense. But if you can get some way to deal with the Hellions, that is the one thing that I would be thinking about first. Like maybe, for instance, going Marauder Viking Marine with an emphasis on Marauders. The Hellions are really the thing that F's everything up for a Marine tanking player. The Hellions are the big threat because, again, your Marines suddenly are, like, bad. Generally, the way players have been responding to mech is just to go all Marauder tanks, sack air control, and just try to get in better engagements. But always the meching player will have more tanks because he's devoting all of his gas to tanks, whereas the Marauder tanking player is devoting some gas to Marauders and those corresponding upgrades. But that might be a good way to do it, to just get Vikings and to begin really trying to smash the air control. Interestingly, there hasn't really been any innovation in that front, and I don't actually have any experience in terms of seeing that or even doing it myself. That might be something very cool to try. To, again, sidestep all of the meching and just be like, well, I'm going to get air control. Because holy crap, if you have air control with the Vikings, suddenly your opponent is going to have to be very leery about moving forward, and the strength of your Marauders increases 3.8-fold. Yes. All right, let's take one more question and then another question after that. Let's take two more questions. Twizzer says, Dear Day9, I'm a Silver Terran with a bad experience with tank battles regarding positioning. When one of these Terran should push it. Let me see. Crap. The question grabber cut the question off. Oh, this is so awesome. So let me take the question, as much of it as is not cut off. I'm a Silver Terran player with a bad experience of tank battles regarding positioning when Terran should push up a ramp if the opponent is sieged up. How essential are Vikings? Interestingly, in so many tank battles, the question is not how do I break into his base and kill him. That is a Grandmaster level question. is how do you break tank lines? And how do you try to shatter his tank line completely? All tank battles and tank positioning are based around controlling expansions. Let's come back to this map and look at this. This siege up has a very clear expansion shutdown. If I can just have tanks here, here, and here, he cannot take this base. If I have tanks here, he cannot take this base. Oh! All of a sudden, I don't need to know how to break his tank line. All I need to know is, if I scan, I can go, oop, it's a little weak there. Now I can edge forward, siege, kill it. Boom! I have the position I want. Yes! And you're in good shape. But let's look at some non-obvious examples. If I am our Green Terran, if I am Fnatic MSI's Reign, if I actually take this area with tanks, this area, and this watchtower, I am now securing this expansion and this expansion. Or, more notably, I want everyone to close your eyes and picture Metalopolis. Top versus right. Top versus right. Imagine top versus right on Metalopolis. They share a Xel'Naga watchtower in between them. If one player can secure that with tanks, he can expand way back behind him. Oh my gosh. If you are any younger Terran player who is struggling, if you are, I don't mean like if you're a 12-year-old Terran, I mean if you're like a, especially bronze to gold, just try to siege tanks up in a way that lets you expand back. And amazingly, just take them, experience this huge influx of money, and then it hardly matters what you do at that point in time. Let's take one more question. Yeah, here is a very good question from Blizzard979. He says, Dear Day 9, what should you do if you did not have air control? Air control is a very important concept because, again, we have to worry about all these tank versus tank engagements. You will have to save a little more for scan because you don't have air control. And the best way to deal with this is to pack your army together in a cluster and do huge bomb attacks with it. The best example that you will ever find of this is Startail's Bomber. The best far and away. He goes all Marine, tank, medevac. Screw Vikings. Maybe he'll get like one, yeah, but I have tanks, motherfucker. That's what Bomber does. And it's so effective to have this huge, scary death ball. Because if you're a player who has tanks, and if you're a player with Vikings and air control, what happens if an army that's 8 times the size of yours rolls through one slightly undefended section? This is the big problem that you have. So in a sense, air control is not an obvious lockdown on the gameplay. It's a way for you to spread your resources a little bit farther thin and to take more bases. Bomber, low on bases, clusters his army together hard, and drills areas with it with brilliance. Unparalleled in all creation. So, we're going to take questions now at the end. Stop asking your frickin' questions, and we'll take some at the end. Now, we are seeing Reign advance a little farther forward, but this area is functionally equivalent to this area. It's basically like the same frickin' thing. He's just making sure that he can exploit this little clusteredness. And we see the Viking lead for Sjow. And what is Reign going to do? Oh, you know it, baby. He's going to be making Udels and Udels of Vikings. We see plenty of tanks in here. Now, good thing to note right away, a great way to bust tank lines, or I guess to be grammatical, a great way to burst tank lines is to get Thors. Thors are good finishers. Thors are not good in the mid-game. I'm going to say that right now. You don't have enough resources to support a lot of Thors mid-game. And yeah, I know Thorzane has done it a couple times well, but you're not Thorzane, and I'm not Thorzane, and I guarantee you Thors are going to be a mistake. I want to steer you clear from trying to get Thors too early. To hurt dirt, bust his tank line. You need a lot of tanks to back it up. Don't you derp on me. Don't you derp on me. So see, look at the way that Sjow is using his vision advantage to slowly bleed forward. We see some Hellion sacking going on by our player Reign. We see some mule sacking. I almost died saying the word mule because I was inhaling while I said it. But again, vision advantage. Sjow going to just gently inch his way forward. Oh! Blue Flame Hellion drops. When you have air control, you can do this sort of monkey business a lot more freely. As we can see, this is going well. But Rain is not trying to do an attack. Doing a big attack is a mistake. He should be trying to secure positions, doing this sort of roundabout damage, and most importantly, taking bases. Securing positions and taking bases. Taking names, I guess, as well, but more importantly, taking bases. And Rain, I think, again, could have just as easily stayed a little bit farther back. And now he's going to begin moving forward again. So we're seeing Sjow move forward surprisingly far. Why would he move forward this aggressively? Because if Rain is trying to secure this area to kill this base, then Sjow wants to secure this area to secure this base. And here you go. Now you have tank positioning lines. There's a justification for these tank battles that are coming up. Now Sjow with his air control, and as we can see, he is going to maintain it. He does have the 5 Vikings out, continuing to make more. Sjow's in a little bit of a rough spot, but he's going to be inching his way forwards-wise. Hellions trying to run in. This is, I would call, not the big focus of the strategy. I mean, this might do damage, and that's great. If this does do damage, great, but don't become obsessed with this. Vikings, Hellion Harass. What do I want to say Hellion Harass is like? I want a perfect analogy for this. I want the best analogy ever. And I don't have it. I have a couple that are very inappropriate. But Hellions are flashy. They give big, amazing advantages. But they're not generally the focus. They're so fun to kill 30 or 40 SCVs with Hellions. And that's great. But they're not the main reason that you're doing all your stuff. Alright, here we go. Here's one. It's like a really hot date with no personality who's boring, and when you tell her a joke, her laugh is actually painful for you to listen to because it sounds like a hyena who's dying. Right? It's that sort of thing. The point of the date is not for her to be hot. It's for her to be an interesting, wonderful person underneath everything. Which is why tank positioning should be your focus. I suck at this. Why do I have a show? I'm like wearing my t-shirt. I'm like representing myself as an identity. Don't focus on Hellions. Why could I have not just said that in the first place? I had to sit like an idiot trying to think of a good comparison. And what I came up with is, don't date a pretty girl. Date a pretty girl. That's a good idea. Oh, shit. All right. Hellions, they can do the damage. That's fine, but don't over-obsess about them. It's expanding and it's tank positioning. Holy double shit, Batman. Let's get back to this thing. Ugh. Alright. If they did damage, that'd be great. Crap. Woo, baby! Guys, whatever you do, don't date someone you find attractive. It's a mistake. Take it from me, guys. I've been single for months. Woo! Bam! Notice that we're still seeing more bases being taken by our Terran player. And he is going to be pulling back a little bit. This is actually the hard part of whenever you're doing some sort of tank move-out play, is when you should be moving out. Whenever you feel like you have somewhat of a tank advantage. But in particular, whenever you feel like his unsieged army is weaker than your unsieged army. So for instance, you scan, you see some Hellions, you maybe see some Marines, and you see a Viking. If you can get that information, you can insta-move out and move forward quite aggressively. Sjow smartly trying to trade Vikings to maintain some air control, but it turns out that he had a misread and is actually behind on the air count, and he's going to lose it. You're going to see a lot of scans going on by Rain. There's another scan, and actually let me pull back for a little bit of time so we can see really how much information this player was getting with his scans on this area. And again, all the key positioning. There's the scan, going to unsiege, going to inch forward, going to do a little funny monkey work. Rescanning. Notice this rescanning going on. You got to be very watchful whenever you're rewatching Terran vs. Terran replays to go to his individual vision to get scans going on. Scary drop going on. Notice these units aren't moving. Notice how they aren't moving. Yeah, he has a threat to deal with, but I would bet you that this is not just him losing focus, because immediately he's going to scan again. He's going to slowly start inching himself forward. And we're going to see another scan again. Nope, he has Vikings. He suddenly doesn't need a scan anymore. Now let's come back to this idea of tank positioning that folks wanted to hear about. We're seeing these expands go down as players get into good position. This is a little bit of a risky expansion because, again, we can see this tank line does not support this expansion. This tank line from Rain easily supports this expansion. This is not a goofy hidden expo. This is a real expo. This is fine. This is well defended, easy to control with this tank line. So now what the hell do you do? Well, what are you trying to go for as Rain? You're trying to go for here. Obviously, if you have a tank sieged here, it's very hard for your opponent to expand there. But if you have your tanks here, you shut down this expansion. Why do we know that this is a good spot? Because we figured it out at the start of the gosh darn frickin' game, guys. God. Right there, we figured out at the start of the game. It's a goal for us to try to get there at the start of the game. So now we're going to come back. We're going to come back to the game. Yeah, we're doing it. We're coming back to the game. Ooh, am I excitable or what? We're seeing, how does he advance forward? How does he advance forward into these siege lines? Well, look at how much he's scanning. Look at this. Rain. Rain continuing to scan. Just making sure that there's not some more stuff here. And we can clearly identify some weak points here, right? Where's the strong point of this push? Well, it's right here. We can see all the overlap of all these tank lines. But we can also see that there's 3 tanks to the left and 2 tanks to the right. I would try to just move some tanks over here, siege up, and pick this off. And then, if this was still weak, I would start trying to move over here and pick this off. There's other ways to approach these 3 on the left. But what I'm going to do is wait until Rain actually begins his advance forward. Look, sieging right on up. Sieging up, he's in range. He's actually taking a little bit of damage. That's fine. It's more about positioning than about exact evenness of exchanges. Still trying to maintain that advantage in terms of tanks. Now that we're in this position, there's 2 ways, again, that Rain can advance forward and take out these tanks. One is to take everything, siege it right here, and kill this off. That's the obvious one. Or I should say, siege it right here. Siege his tanks barely in range to kill off these. Another one would be for him to try to move into this area, cut off reinforcements, and then as this is isolated, slowly Rain will build up forces and cut it off. You're trying to pinch off reinforcements or isolate danglers. That's a good way to describe a couple tanks off to a side, is danglers. So again, why is Rain doing this attack? Why is he doing this Hellion drop? Not because Hellion drops are good, but because this tank line positioning allows him freedom of movement in the air. And hell, looks like he's just going to try to drop to kill off these tanks. Though it may have been a good idea, it's not part of the tank versus tank placement that I wanted to focus on. Hey, look at this. Xeris. Damn it, Rain, who's playing on Xeris' account, is moving here. Why is this a good idea? It helps to force things back and is isolating these tanks. These tanks are going to start to be these little poor orphans that are off to the side. It's going to be very difficult for him to be able to reinforce. In fact, even if there was a drop here with these tanks, then it might be okay. In the meantime, Rain has been getting a whole bunch more tanks over here. And this might look like a LOL moment, like, oh, he's putting on so much damage, and he only has 4 tanks. Look at that macro. This is less macro and more that these tanks here, isolating these guys. Whenever you isolate, macro up big, and then overrun it with a big direct push. As we can see, more good scans and vision going on by Rain. This is hard as hell for Sjow to go and defend because he has to squeeze himself around the edges to avoid these tanks. Great job of isolating. And now, Rain controls this high ground. You know what I would do if I were Rain? Probably nothing. Maybe try to push up here. I don't really see any big weaknesses in this tank line. With the one exception that I have like 8 times as many tanks as him. But from a positional standpoint, nothing that big. So I'm going to start scouting expansions, which is exactly what we see Rain doing. This is the place I wanted to control all game long. I control it. I'm just going to expand, deny him expansions, and go back to Viking production. Oh, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm also going to get upgrades, but that's just what you always want to do when you have a lead. Sjow's going to be making himself some more tankers, smartly getting these Thors to try to break through this stranglehold, but, I mean, control the watchtowers, hold the tank line, expand, 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 orbital command. Man, deflam. Hellions continuing to clean up. Great advantage here is that you can have the Hellions do a little cleanup run around. Dropping here, occasionally trying to kill off SCVs is fine. You don't need to attack at this point. I'm going to say that again. You don't need to attack at this point if you're Rain. You don't need to attack. I have a question for you. Do you need to attack at this point? You don't. You really don't. You are in a big lead. You have many bases. You are smashing many faces. No need to do any sort of weird coin flip races. When I was younger, I had to wear braces. So what we're going to see, Rain do is, interestingly, he's just pulling back. Yeah, these tanks were here initially to isolate the tanks over here from Sjow. He's just pulling back, man. He's just getting the good line. And now suddenly there's no weaknesses. There's no stragglers off to the side. There's no dangling tanks. Sjow, what did we say that Bomber did so well? Force his whole army together into one big pack and then just start dealing massive damage with it in concentrated bursts. We're going to see a little bit of rearrangement going on by Rain. And for the most part, really no weakness in this defense. And once this gets shut down, Rain would be wise to pull these back to this area up here. Pulling them back here. And you know what Rain's doing? He's expanding, as he should. He's expanding. He's upgrading. Where's his guy? Yeah, there it is. Upgrade, Rain. Do it. Sjow has all his forces in one spot. He's trying to burst a little hole. He's trying to pop a bubble. He's trying to do some bubble bursting. And the game's going to be over relatively quickly because, as we're going to see, Sjow cannot withstand the heat. And what is Rain doing? Rain is not trying to rush up here to do some sort of big kill play. This is the whole place where all of Rain's strategy was revolving around. So why not continue to revolve around that little circle? GG. So let me go ahead and clear the question grabber. Clear. And let's take some questions to wrap up this daily. That was a fun daily. That was fun. That was good. I like that daily. That one, wait. Everything went better than expected. And I will be eating Chipotle after it. Oh, Chipotle, Chipotle. And exciting news, these shirts will be coming soon. Coming soon. Coming soon. These shirts will be so hip hip. Hooray, hooray, yippity bee. So here's a question by Serona, who says, Day 9, with all the struggle over air control and possibly losing it and being behind, wouldn't it always be better or more efficient to just focus on a strategy that doesn't rely on air control? Is Bomber TvT style a smarter way to play the matchup? I actually think that... It's kind of map dependent. What's really nice about air control is that it allows you to secure positions a lot more easily. And if a map really has some big positions that you'd want to secure all game long, I really like this kind of style. If you're on a map like Tal'Darim Altar, I have seen players really not do any big struggles for air control. Maybe they'll make a couple of Vikings here and there, but they won't mass up Vikings. That will never really happen. On a map like this, I see nothing wrong with getting 8 or 9 Vikings to secure the center area and also to watch for drops a little carefully.